Good morning, fellow humans. I haven't posted a video in a little bit. I wanted to thank you for your patience. If I have an exceptionally small audience. In fact, most of these videos have no views, and that's okay. That's consistent with my purpose, which is a long-term project. I am not particularly interested in short-term gains that are just self-aggrandizing. That's not my purpose for being here with you. And in fact, this video to this week, my purpose is to, in my own way, celebrate Black History Month, which you have not spoken. We haven't in the public sphere of in the American public sphere right now. That discussion that hasn't really been as prevalent a conversation in this last week, this last month, this last period as it normally is, mostly because of certain propagandic efforts on the purpose of our enemies, on the purpose of the neoconfederates, the neoconfederate movement, the lost cause movement, all of these things. And I would like to kind of have a small reading as my own celebration of Black History Month, but to understand that, because to understand like why I would care is a complex process or a complex discussion, but most people don't really understand or really care to understand kind of the purposes of the symbology of Black History Month and where it came from, and the fact that the original concept was Black History Week, as was proposed by a historian, Carter Woodson, in the 20s. I think I don't remember exactly when it was proposed. I'll have to look back up. But one of the reasons why why Carter Woodson, the historian, the one that was that really was the aggregator for the desire to kind of encapsulate this, he proposed a week, and then President Ford turned it into a month, which is appropriate for reasons that are interesting to discuss. And if you don't agree or understand, that's fine, which is partially my point for sharing these videos and exposing my fellow citizens to some of these concepts. And so one of the things that I want to do is kind of celebrate Black History Month in my own way. And to do that, you need to understand that the original concept of Mr. Carter, Mr. Woodson, was a week. And that week was specifically chosen in February to align with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln, which is February 12th, and the birth of Frederick Douglass, which is February 14th. So that kind of encapsulated that nicely, especially for the Black community and the abolitionist community at the time. Yeah. I mean, there's nuance to that statement historically, but my goal is to not be definitive. My goal is to kind of give you a taste, and you do your own research on the realities of this, and then come and we can actually discuss. We can debate what our positions are. Anyway. So this, my version of Black History Month week, my celebration is I'm going to share a reading of a document. I've done this a few times on this channel before, and I'm going to continue to do so because there's a lot of reasons for that, not the least of which is I think it is vital and important for these touch points of history, these crystallizations of human thought as are represented by some of these vital statesmen or writings or declarations. These are important to keep in the zeitgeist, to keep relevant, and to keep inspiring future generations to do the research and to understand where they came from. So tomorrow is Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Some of us would say the president. And I can the roots run deep, and that's one of the things that I am trying to communicate with some of these videos, is kind of a sense of the depth and breadth of human experience that are represented by these things that are being created with their memes of flippant perspectives. I don't have the language yet to kind of declare what I mean by that, but anyway, you get the point. So one of the things that I would like to do today as a celebration of my ancestors who, looking like me, like we, the reality is that I look like the victors of the colonialist wars, if you want to frame it that way, of the colonialist worldview. I am the inheritor of that. I look like the inheritor of that, and a lot of my upbringing and my culture was created to kind of foster that sense. Anyway, the point is that I want to share a reading of this document that is important to our shared history, and is very important and very poignant to the struggle that we continue to be in. I personally believe that we are nearly in a different phase of the Civil War. A lot of people right now of neoconfederate movements are rightly so in some ways push back on the thought that they are Nazis. That's just not factually true. And yes, I understand all the purposes and reasoning, and I understand kind of the symbology that is being used, that particular flavor. But to be honest, that particular flavor of fascism is not an American product. In fact, that version of fascism and white supremacy and all of these kinds of things that are encapsulated, our American heritage is much older than the Nazis. In fact, one could argue that a great significant amount of the evil that was exhibited upon the world by that regime was taught them by our culture, by our heritage, by our actions. And so I personally have the kind of the worldview that the criticism is correct. The current kind of flurry of people being of an audience, of a specific cultural audience, being called Nazis is not correct. That's why I call them neo-Confederates. They're not Confederates. Well, some of them are. Some of them have the courage and the conviction to publicly declare their allegiances to that worldview. And I respect courage. That's a complicated, chivalric topic that to respect the courage of your enemy is a universal function of human combative behavior and the ability to navigate those concepts. I don't want to talk too much about that. That's not the purpose today, but it's there. And there's a certain degree of respect that I have for those individuals that have the fortitude and the conviction to declare themselves as is proper and appropriate on a field of conflict, whether that conflict be intellectual, emotional, spiritual, or physical. There's a certain degree of respect that I can show courage. Deep topic. Different topic for a different day. Anyway, what I would like to read today is a very important document framed in a very specific time. And this document this event is heralded and kind of seen as a pivot point in some ways, a declarative point certainly, in American history. And for those nerds that are familiar with the topic, I'll be reading the Bliss copy of this document. There are numerous copies. There are numerous kind of, not really versions, but copies, yeah, of this document. So for specific historic purposes, I'll be reading the Bliss copy of this of this speech on the eve of Abraham Lincoln's birthday, 2026, as we are grappling with the new version of the neoconfederate movement. And yeah, some virtues need to be signaled. And this is one of those reasons. This is one of how we do this, is we take the statesmen of the past, the men and women whose lives, daily lives, this was a reality, and we look and hearken back to those decision points in history of those points of morality, of the reality of the decisions that our ancestors had to make on this very topic, on the topic that we are currently struggling again with. And I've got a lot to say about why, how, and where we got here, whatever. But the important part is that the truth shall always march on. And the heroes of the past are also the heroes of the future. And those who stood and delivered need to be remembered and honored. And their thought processes, how they came to their conclusions, how they determined what their path should be, and how much and what they sacrificed for those purposes needs to be re-examined and re-understood in a modern context, because these are the same struggles with the same original sin and the same two worldviews opposing each other with as much and as modern of a tool as is appropriate at each of the iterations of this cycle of conflict. And so in that spirit, I would like to read for you a sacred speech that was given at a crossroads of time and morality and nations, at a crossroad of our times. As impactful as the Battle of Hastings, as impactful as the Battle of Bosworth, as impactful as the Battle of the Bulge, as impactful as humans are. This speech was given on November 19th, 1863, on the fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, by the current President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives, that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do so, that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, and above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here. But it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to that great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. I hope you have a good day, my fellow humans.